Often people give too much credit to the devil. And I want to tell you something, that God is sovereign over demons, over the devil, over false prophets. We read in Colossians 2 verse 10, and you are complete in who? In him, in Jesus, who is the head of all principality and power. Who is the head of all principality and power? It is Jesus. Now, let's go to a passage that is kind of surprising. Why do God permits false prophets? And we read that in Deuteronomy chapter 13. One of the reasons is so he could test us to see if we truly love him and if we love his word. We go to Deuteronomy 13 verse 1 to 3 and says, if there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder comes to pass, of which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet, or that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. So who is the one that's testing us when this happens? And what is the reason why God allows us to see if we love him? Let's go to Ezekiel 14:9, and it says the following. And if the prophet is induced to speak anything, I, the Lord, have induced him, that prophet, and I will stretch out my hand against him and destroy him from among my people Israel. Wait a minute, who has induced? Who has deceived that prophet? Well, God says, I am the Lord who deceived that prophet. Because God is sovereign over the demons. Now let's continue. God wanted King Ahab dead. He wanted him destroyed. And what does God does? In 1 Kings 22. We see this in verse 21 to 23. God sends a deceitful spirit to deceive Ahab, prophets. Let's read it. Then a spirit came forth and stood before the Lord and said, I will persuade him. The Lord said to him, in what way? So he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And the Lord said, you shall persuade him and also prevail. Go out and do so. Therefore, look, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all your prophets, and the Lord has declared disaster against you. Oh God, when he wants to use a lying spirit, he's able to, because he's sovereign over this. 1 Samuel chapter 16, when it talks about King Saul, when the Holy Spirit departed from King Saul, then what came upon Saul? We see a demon came upon Saul, but who sent that demon? We see in 1 Samuel 16, verse 14, it says, but the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing spirit from the Lord troubled him. So we see the Spirit of the Lord leaves him, but then a distressing spirit, comes upon King Saul. God is sovereign over the demons. You know something? We look at the book of Job, and we notice something. In chapter 1, we see it was by God that Satan attacked Job. It wasn't Satan who came to God first and said, "Oh, I want Job." No, it was God who told Satan. He told Satan in verse 8 of chapter 1, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns him?" And Job understood this, because what does Job say? Job doesn't say, "The Lord gave and Satan took away." No. Job said, "The Lord gave and the Lord took away." He understood that it was God. God is in control of everything. Oh, you might say, "Well, God is the author of evil." No, God is not the author of evil. But nevertheless, God controls evil. And in one sense or the other, it was by God command that evil came upon earth. Because who created the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? It was God. He was the creator of that tree in Genesis chapter 2. But God himself is not evil. But God uses evil many times to work out his purpose. We can see an example in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, where Joseph tells his brothers, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." God had a purpose involved in this. And if you're a Christian, you know that all things work together for good to those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. That's Romans 8:28. So, God is sovereign over demons. God is sovereign over the false prophets. In 2 Samuel 24, we see, "And the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel." So what did God do? "And he moved David against them to say, 'Go number Israel and Judah.'" Now, God moved David to number Israel because he was mad at Israel. But what did God do? And who did God use to arouse David to do this very thing? And we see this in 1 Chronicles. 1 Chronicles 21, verse 1. "Now Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel." So God used Satan to move David to number Israel. This is not a contradiction among the Bible. Some people like to take those two passages and say, "Oh, this is a contradiction." No, it's not a contradiction. When you understand God's sovereignty over things. Why did God allow this? Because he was against Israel at that moment. All brothers and sisters, we have to understand that God is sovereign over everything. When you understand that, you live in peace. Because that same God who is sovereign over everything, he loves you. And he has a plan for you if you're a Christian. Now, we go to Matthew chapter 4. And we know something that we noticed here. Something important. Which shows God's authority, Jesus' authority. In Matthew 4, verses 10 and 11, "Then Jesus said to Satan, 'Away with you, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve.' Then the devil left them, and behold, angels came and ministered to him." Notice when Jesus said, "Away with you, Satan," Satan left. And when Jesus told Satan, "You shall worship the Lord your God," he's saying to Satan, the Lord is your God. Understand that.